forward and back together.
Wait, are we saying the little ones? Okay, like all the things like.
My name's Dylan Yates, and I'm the scholar in residence here at the Old Stone House. While the Continental Congress, assembled at Philadelphia, declared independence from Britain on July 4th, 1776, the New York Provincial Congress did not endorse this until July 9th, 246 years ago today. That night, General George Washington ordered broadsides of his Revolutionary Declaration posted throughout Manhattan and Brooklyn, and then read aloud to the American troops preparing for the British assault. Hundreds of British warships were already in the Narrows, waiting to pounce. When Captain Oliver Brown heard the Declaration read in Manhattan, he decided to tear down the statue of King George III at Bowling Green. Brown was 23 years old, from Lexington, Massachusetts. He witnessed the Boston Massacre, participated in the Tea Party, and after helping push the British out of Boston, came to New York to prepare for another fight. Brown later claimed he had contemplated destroying the statue as soon as he saw it, but after hearing the Declaration read aloud, it convinced him to act. Brown organized a crew of 40 sailors and soldiers to pull the king off his pedestal, cut up his body, and mutilate his head. The statue was commissioned during the American outrage over the Stamp Act in 1766 as a reminder of who was in charge. It was modeled after a statue of Marcus Aurelius in Rome, but instead of marble, it was made of lead gilded in a layer of gold. Subjects of the British Empire were taught to revere the king as an agent of God. But for Brown and his compatriots, the statue symbolized outrageous excess built through tyranny. Washington actually chided Brown for his actions. While the general acknowledged Brown was motivated by zeal in the public cause, he disapproved of how such conduct might reflect on his nascent army. However, since the damage had already been done, American commanders ordered the statue melted into musket balls. Some of those bullets may have been used right here 7 weeks later on August 27th at the Battle of Brooklyn. Brown agreed with Washington's reasoning and was ashamed of his behavior for the rest of his life. Nevertheless, his actions inspired many Americans to support independence. Soldiers and civilians alike clamored for pieces of the Gilded King to give to their friends across the region to use as shot. Loyalists also scrambled to salvage any parts of their majesty that they could get their hands on. They buried pieces in the ground to keep them safe until the rebellion was put down. Some of those pieces still survive, and a few are on display at the New York Historical Society. Destroying a statue of the king challenged the edifice of empire. Newspapers across Europe printed fanciful images of the outrage for their readers, which, like the Declaration itself, helped inspire revolutions that would spread across France, Haiti, Latin America, and beyond in the early 19th century, and continuing to the present day. New Yorkers left the empty pedestal up at Bowling Green for decades as a reminder, because toppling the king's statue came to symbolize how the people could stand up to abuses of power. As we continue to try to build a future that delivers on America's founding promises, it's clear we need to reckon with our nation's past. We do not need to agree with everything that was done before us to take inspiration from it. We can keep what we want and cast aside what no longer works for us. We will now read the Declaration of Independence and then tear down the king. But before we do, I want to thank Kim Mayer, director of the Old Stone House, for hosting this event. Be sure to subscribe to their mailing list, like them on social media, and most importantly, come back here for Battle Week at the end of August. I also want to thank Steph Ching, Gianna Littleton, Masha Bez, Peter Cook, Roger Sakar, Sadia Reben, Harry Flood, and the illustrious Paul Carlotto for their help and encouragement. And thank you all for coming.
A declaration by the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to themselves should seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same objective, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to overthrow such government and to provide new guards for the future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and it is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government.
The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions of the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions from within. He has endeavored to present the population of these states, for that purpose of obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, raising the conditions anew of appropriation of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving him assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it once an example and fit instrument for the introducing the same rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete their works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for a redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act that might define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and our settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity. We have conjured them by ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which announces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war and in peace friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and are by right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may by right do. And for the support of this declaration, and with firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honors. Signed by order and on behalf of the Congress, John Hancock, President.
Huzzah! Anyone want to help knock the statue over? One.
Come this way.
Come on this side. Come on this side.
Then I push it this way.
Forward. Nope. Come on. Yeah. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, push! Yeah!
Wow.
Yeah.